Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Oklahoma City Planning Commission for November 9th, 2017. If you will turn your phones or other devices off, that would be helpful. For those of you who might be with us for the first time, how this works is, I have a little bit of housekeeping here to do at the beginning, but when we get to the regular business of the agenda, we'll go through, we'll ask the applicant for each item to come forward, give us name and address, tell us what it is that they're seeking, and what they want us to know about that. Commissioners will have a chance to ask any questions they might have. If there are persons here who wish to speak either for or against that item, we'll hear them. Somebody will make a motion and we'll vote. We ask that people kind of keep their remarks short and to the point, and address whatever comments they have to us. Having said all that, I think we'll start. First item is the receipt of the minutes from the October 26th meeting of the Planning Commission.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the October 26th meeting. Would you cast your votes, please? They are received. The next item is requests for continuance, and first will be those that are agreed.
Okay, and I'll read those for the record. On your agenda, item B27 for case PUD 1655 is requesting to defer to December 14th. Item B28 for PUD 1658, defer to December 14th. Item B29, case PUD 1660, defer to December 14th. Item B30 for case C6938, defer to December 14th. And item B31 for case C6892 to defer to January 25th.
Is there anybody present who wanted to be heard on any of those items? If not, I'll take a motion to continue those items.
I'll make a motion to continue the items.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue items 27 through 31. Would you cast your votes, please? They are continued.
We also received 3 new requests for continuance for item B14 for case C6946 to defer to December 14th, for item B18 for case SPUD 1019, defer to December 14th, and for item B20 on the agenda for case C6936 to defer to December 14th.
Is there anyone present who wanted to be heard on any of those items today? If not, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to continue items 14, 18, and 20. If you'll cast your votes, please. They are continued. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other requests for continuance? Come forward, please.
SPUD 1020. My name is Charles Mullins. I represent MPMM Investments, which is an adjoining landowner to this proposed change. I was just hired on the case Tuesday. I'm kind of throwing myself at your mercy asking for a continuance. I spoke to Mr. Box about that on Tuesday, and we couldn't reach an agreement. This is a substantial change to the zoning, and we just have not had a chance to do sufficient due diligence to make a well-informed decision about whether we support or do not support this change. My client has owned land, developed property along Northwest 23rd since 1966, and is currently redeveloping a property with a new strip center directly across the street from this proposed zoning change. We view this as a very serious matter and a very substantial change to the neighborhood, especially with It's now called with the new districts that we have here in Oklahoma City, the Windsor District.
We're not going to argue the merits of the case. May I ask the applicant if they are in agreement with the continuance?
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. We are not. He did call me on Tuesday, and we visited about it. I made myself and my client available every waking moment between the time in which I spoke until today. I explained that we have spent significant time meeting with the neighbors. His client was actually at the neighborhood meeting that was held almost 2 weeks ago, and this didn't surface until, I think less than 48 hours before the hearing. Again, I made myself available. I'm not sure what a continuance would do. The issues are fairly straightforward. Chairman Powers, you were there. Commissioner Coffey, you were there. I thought we had a very good discussion. We will continue to make ourselves available between now and City Council, but I think this feels like a delay for the sake of delay.
Well, then we will hear the item in order, and you can renew your request at that time, and Commission will consider it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Well, then let's move on.
On that, excuse me, on item 15, you've got some time. Perhaps you guys could go outside, and if your client has concerns, it'd be beneficial to hear those, and so you have an opportunity to meet, I guess is my point. Don't waste it.
Thank you, Commissioner. So let's move on.
On the consent docket, there are 8 items. For the record, I'll read those in. Number 1 is PUD SP 64 for a specific plan of PUD 1369. Item number 2 is PUD SP 65 for a specific plan of PUD 1592. Item 3 is ABC 913 for an ABC 2 overlay of PUD 778. Item 4 is ABC 914 for an ABC 2 overlay of 13002 North Penn. Item number 5 is PC 10514 to rezone 312 North 69th Street from I2 to I2 from R1. And item number 6 is C6942, the final plat of North Penn Addition, Section 2. Item 7 is C6943, the final plat of Settlers Ridge Retail Center. And item 8 is C6945, the final plat of Oak Hollow Industrial Park, Phase 3.
I guess I'll ask first, is there anybody present who wants to be heard on any of those items? I have a question for the applicant on item number 2, or maybe it's actually for staff. I was a little unclear after looking at my staff report whether the signs are included or not included.
They're not.
Okay. That solves that problem. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Do you want to separate I have a conflict as it relates to one of the consent items, so I'm going to have to recuse myself from voting on it. So do we need to separate that out?
I think that'd be probably the easiest thing to do. Just pull it, and then we'll vote. Which item is it?
Item number 5, PC 10514.
Okay, we'll pull item number 5, and I'll take a motion on the balance of the consent items.
I'll move approval of the consent docket, deleting item 5.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent item minus item number 5. Would you cast your votes, please? They are approved. We'll let Commissioner Cravens absent himself.
Make a motion to approve item 5.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 5. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved. Okay.
Moving on, items requiring separate vote. Item number 9 on your agenda is for case ABC 912 for an ABC 3 overlay of the DTD2 district at 814 West Sheridan Avenue.
The applicant present.
Jose Rodriguez.
Mr. Rodriguez, what is it you're asking us for?
We are looking to open up another themed bar. Currently, I'm the owner for Flashback Retro Pub, so we're looking to open up another business next to it. It'll be a karaoke-style bar, non-smoking.
Commissioners, we have questions of the applicant. Is there anyone present who wants to be heard on this item? No?
I'll move approval.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 9. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is case PC 10-513 to rezone 1921, 1925, and 1929 Northeast 25th Street from R1 to R4.
Is the applicant present? Would you come forward, give us your name and address for the record, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Coleman, and I'm the owner of the property that are listed in the application. Are you wanting that address or my personal address?
Your personal address.
Okay, I'm sorry. My personal address is 1409 Canyon Bridge Lane, Edmond, Oklahoma.
Thank you. So tell us what it is you're asking us for.
Yes, this property is a 12-unit apartment complex that was constructed in 1948, and I believe at that time it was zoned R1. I acquired the property September 20th of this year, and I have begun to rehab it so I can get certificates of occupancy. And to my surprise, it's not zoned R4 such that in the event of total demise, I couldn't rebuild it back to its current condition. So my purpose for the request is simply to bring it into compliance.
That is not unusual, but I understand your surprise. Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on this matter? Commissioners? Questions, comments? Motion?
I will make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item number 10. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 11 is PC 10-515 to rezone 2501 Northeast 14th Street from R1 to R2.
The applicant present?
Good afternoon, Luana DeLine, 8721 Northeast 47th and Spencer.
Tell us what it is you're asking for.
I'm asking to rezone it from R1 to R2 in order to build a duplex.
And it's currently a vacant lot, right?
Yes.
So this is infill
Yes, it is.
development?
Mm-hmm.
Commissioners, is there anyone present who wants to be heard on this item?
How long has this land been vacant?
Quite a while.
Any idea? Just
Cassie Poor, 317 Northwest 21st Street. I am with the Alliance for Economic Development, and we manage the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority, who actually owns this lot. So we are under a redevelopment agreement with Ms. DeLine to redevelop the property. She's looking to redevelop the lot into a duplex for herself and her mother. And it's been vacant probably since the 70s when Urban Renewal acquired the lot. So we're working really hard to try to redevelop those vacant properties and bring rooftops back into the neighborhood.
okay. Thank you.
Well, we can rest assured that if it's an urban renewal property, it's going to have some development controls imposed on it, so I think that's comforting.
If there's no other discussion, I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 11. Would you cast your votes, please? It's approved. Good luck.
Item number 12 is C-6940, the preliminary plat of Penbrook.
The applicant present?
Good afternoon. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates here on behalf of the applicant. This is a re-preliminary plat. This has been platted preliminarily before. It was developed south of this map into the neighborhood that is there, Riverbend, and it had the street that runs north and south, Brianne Lane, was constructed originally, so we're kind of married to that street already there. It's a concrete street. This plat layout does not change much from what was originally approved. In the southeast corner of the property, all the land, with the exception of the very northwest corner of the property where there's a high line that divides the tract, all of the land drains towards the creek on the east side. So we would like to put a detention pond in that southeast corner, which there's a termination of a street that stubbed north originally. To tie that street back in would eliminate the ability to put a decent-sized detention pond, which is what's needed there. The existing Grass Creek is a little undersized, and they've had drainage issues there before. So we intend to improve that and make it meet current ordinances by doing so. So we agree with all the staff's technical evaluations. Be happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, you were saying that you're married to the entrance. Is it Brehan? Is that
Brehan, yeah. So it's a double-wide entrance at Wilshire, and then that straight north and south street, it actually does jog to the west and then down and ties in there north of 74th Street. So that's already in place. So we're married to that. So we have two connections to the neighborhood to the south. It's just the far east one. It's a little bit of an awkward connection as it is. So our intent is to work with Public Works to do a PD plan to smooth out that turn, and then we'll connect all the sidewalks that dead end there now.
Okay.
So you're not putting a connection into the neighborhood to the south down in the southeast corner, right? You're just altering your turn radius there.
Right.
And putting your detention pond down in that corner.
Correct. That's really the only place that it would function.
That you could function.
And solve the problem.
Okay. All right. Thanks. That clarifies that for me.
Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this item today? No? Commissioners? You are in agreement with TEs, you said?
Yes.
If there's no other comments, I'll move approval of the application.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 12. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 13 is the preliminary plat of Rivendell South, case D6935.
Tim Johnson again on behalf of the applicant. This also is a piece of development that has outlived its preliminary plat. So we're coming back now with a revised preliminary plat. The lots in this revised preliminary plat are a little bigger than what was originally approved. And it's a continuation of the Rivendell development. It'll actually be sections 14, 15, and 16 as they go forward. You'll see the final plat of section 14 come before you, I believe, at your next meeting. Again, we agree with all the TEs on this. Request your approval.
Are those traffic circles?
Yes. They're in excess of the minimum standard that the city has issued. There's actually art in the one that exists at 131st and Lorien Way. It's a tower.
Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on this item? Commissioners? Oh, I had a question. I'm sorry. There's a note in the staff report that this is airport adjacent. Is there
I think it falls under the easement, the navigation easement.
And so what does that require of the developer?
Depends on what zone you're in. I can't remember what zone we're in. I don't think it was impacted any of the residential. It's a height restriction in that zone. If you're in a zone closer, then there's a noise restriction abatement that requires additional insulation and things like that. But in this case, it was a height restriction.
Okay. That's okay. All right.
I move approval of the application.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve item number 13. Cast your votes, please.
Thank you.
Item 14 was continued. Item 15 is SPUD 1020, to rezone 4825 Northwest 23rd Street from PUD 815 to SPUD 1020.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Matt Boyle, who is part of the ownership group of what will be this property. This is a SPUD to convert what was a assisted living and memory care facility to a drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility. This will be a residential facility, but understanding perhaps the connotations that phrase might have, we did have a public meeting. We had a public meeting, I believe it was October 30th, and we invited folks from the business community as well as the residential area. It was fairly well attended. There were, I believe, 25 people in addition to my client, and Commissioner Coffey and Chairman Powers were at this meeting as well. One of the big concerns early on in the meeting was this going to be kind of a drop-in medication clinic? Were they going to take court-ordered patients, and just what type of patient might we see here? I'm going to let Matt here in a moment kind of walk through who they are, what their philosophy is, and how they run their businesses. But what we told the neighbors up front was that my client takes private pay. They don't do Medicaid. It's not a jail diversion program. They don't take court-ordered patients. And so I think a lot of those things went a long way in perhaps helping the neighbors understand and frankly get comfortable with it. We committed to continue to work with the neighbors. Mrs. Kim Lowe, who is here today, I believe is, if she's not the HOA president, she is certainly their biggest cheerleader and did a phenomenal job of taking the information that we had, and she posted it on the neighborhood's website, as well as some information about my client, so that anybody that was there or anybody just generally in the neighborhood that had concerns would have the ability to go on and look at not only the SPUD and the revisions we made, but also about my client. So I do want to highlight a few of the changes that are in the SPUD that you're now hearing. There's a handful of them. One beginning on page 3, and I don't know if you have the SPUD in front of you, but page 3 is where the use units are listed. And what you'll see is under 8250.18, which is the use unit necessary for our use, we list 2 further restrictions to this use unit. The first being, and I'll quote, "This use is further restricted to prohibit court-ordered patients." And the next limitation is, "This use is further restricted to prohibit the use of a drop-in medication clinic." If you look at your staff report, there are 3 TEs. We agree with 1 and we agree with 2. And when I met with staff, number 3, what they're wanting is a detailed description of what this facility is. So we do agree with TE3, and in fact we've already made the revisions, and they are in the SPUD that has been presented to staff, and I will read the further description. What we've essentially done is try to make this like a special permit. So we've included a program description into the SPUD, so if it were passed by the council, it would be an ordinance, therefore enforceable. And so I'll read it. The facility offers a full spectrum of services, including medical detox, residential treatment, partial hospitalization, and intensive outpatient programs. Patients undergoing medical detox or at a residential treatment level of care may not leave the premises except under staff supervision. The facility employs 24-hour staff and extensive security cameras to enforce this policy. In the rare instance that a patient disobeys the policy, he or she is not welcome back to the program or any affiliated alumni events. The facility will not apply for either a Medicaid license number or any contract with the state or federal Department of Corrections to be a prison diversion program or any other involuntary program for individuals court-ordered to treatment. So what we have is a facility that will be a private pay facility for people who are struggling. We're in this country right now, we've got a significant crisis on our hands. I would submit that this is not a serious departure from the memory care and the assisted living use that has been in this building for years. It is a residential-based treatment program that we will operate. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this moment, or if not right now, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Boyle to go through and explain their company.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Where are facilities like this typically located?
Well,
this is an atypical location. Where are they typically located?
Well, this is not an atypical location. In fact, my client operates a location in Louisville that is in a similar location, in that it's right in the middle of a neighborhood. This location, I guess it's fairly atypical because it's kind of in between the residential component and the commercial component. Here, it's even more perhaps atypical because you've got apartments on the east, you've got a nursing home on the north, and our site is kind of like an L-shaped, and there's a repair shop that's actually on the hard corner of 23rd and Ann Arbor. We're set off just back from that. So in their experience, they're typically in residential areas because that's where they're drawing from, and that's where they want their patients to be in a residential type environment.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Boyle. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Landmark Recovery. Do I have to state my address?
Please do.
Okay. My address is 9977 East South Bend Drive, Scottsdale, Arizona. Okay.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate what Mr. Bach said, just so that you know, the license type that we need from the state of Oklahoma is the exact same license type that was at the building. Our use, our sub-use within that license type is a little bit different, but I just thought that I'd throw that fact out there, that we will be getting the exact same license type from the state that already exists. If we can go to the third slide, please. This one. So first I wanted to talk to you guys about the opiate epidemic. It's something that I presume a lot of you hear about on the news, but just some statistics. Currently, one person dies of a heroin overdose in the United States every 16 minutes. In 2015, 1 in 50 deaths in the United States was related to drugs. Drug overdoses surpassed car accidents in 2016 as the leading cause of preventable death. For the first time in 25 years, in 2016, life expectancy in the United States fell rather than increased, and it's entirely attributable to this crisis. Suffice to say, we're in the middle of a crisis like we haven't seen, and there is a real need for drug treatment services, which is why our company, which has for a very long time done assisted living, 3 years ago, we made the decision to pivot and to try to do something about this crisis. Frankly, addiction has ravaged my personal family. We're a family-owned business. This is very personal to us. You know, my mother's life was saved because she received high-quality treatment. And our mission as a family is to bring that kind of treatment to as many people as possible. Next slide. How long do I have? Is it 3-minute limit?
You know, I'll give you some leeway on that. I will say this. I don't think that there's probably anybody sitting around this horseshoe that needs to be convinced that the world is in dire need of drug and alcohol treatment.
Okay. So then we'll go ahead and...
I mean, not to diminish what you're saying, it is very important work, and it's a very important public service and use. The question for us is always, you know, is this the right place for it? Is this location? So if you want to speak to that.
Sure, absolutely.
If I could, why don't you, if I direct you to maybe starting about Landmark Recovery, which I
yeah, that's where I was going to go. So that's why I asked that question.
Go down the list from there, because that gets to the land uses and what's going on in your, and a bit about your operation.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we've been in business since 1985. As I said, up until 3 years ago, we were exclusively in the long-term care business. We currently own and operate 8 facilities across 4 states. And when it comes to chemical dependency treatment, our treatment model is unique. We use something called Seeking Safety, which is a trauma-informed program. Many places will say they use evidence-based treatment. We go one step further in that our model, which is Seeking Safety, is empirically tested. There was a study done at UCLA about 3 years ago that demonstrated that Seeking Safety, which is our program, is more effective than your generic treatment program in terms of increasing abstinence. We have a complete alumni program. We follow our patients for 5 years after discharge, at least every 90 days. We offer 3 times weekly alumni events on campus where they can reconnect with the community and stay in touch. And then we also offer a comprehensive family program 3 nights a week, as well as visitation on Saturdays, where we help the family understand the disease of addiction. So basically, we have a very comprehensive program. In terms of the services that we offer, we do medical detoxification, which is when you're withdrawing from the drug or alcohol. Residential treatment is when you physically live at the facility. Usually that's about 30 to sometimes 45 days. A partial hospitalization program, I don't know why they use the term hospitalization. It's been in use forever. It has nothing to do with the hospital. It's just you go 5 days a week for 5 hours a day, and then you go home. And then intensive outpatient is when you go 3 days a week for 3 hours a day, and then you go home. So it's kind of a gradual step-down process. So you might be engaged with Landmark Recovery for, anywhere from 3 to 5 months between all of these different programs. And then, of course, you have the alumni program. So we're not just treating them and then throwing them to the wolves. We really follow our patients long-term, as long as insurance allows us to, frankly. Next slide. Key population facts. Just to give you an idea, our cash pay rate is $23,500 for 45 days. We do accept commercial insurance. I don't know what the insurance are in Oklahoma, but Humana and United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, but that's our price. So it gives you an idea of the type of clientele that we generally attract. We do not accept Medicaid. And the reason for that is it's just there are a lot of good programs, we believe, that focus on that. The clientele are just different, and that's kind of a strategic decision that we made. We're a voluntary program. Again, we're really focused on people who are highly motivated to change. We want to help those who can be helped. And we feel that people who are court-ordered to treatment or prison diverted, don't mesh well with the type of patients we're after. We are a locked facility, so in order to get out, a staff member has to unlock the door and let you out. We're staffed 24/7. Our minimum staff ratio on night shift is 8 patients to 1 staff person, and we're making a difference. We've been open a little over a year in Louisville, and our sobriety rate at a year is over 50%, and industry average is between 15 and 20. So we're really proud with the results that we're getting. And this is just a picture of the site. To be honest, development's not really my specialty, so I don't know what I'm supposed to say with that.
Before you sit down,
yes.
Commissioners, does anyone have a question?
Just to be clear,
yes.
On a couple of points that were concerns of mine, you don't operate any sort of what I would call methadone clinic?
No,
where
and we're strictly abstinence-based program.
Okay, so they're treated on the facility. It's not a come-and-go type clinic for drug replacement.
Absolutely not.
Any of those type services, okay? And so that won't be something that your application allows either.
Correct.
All right, in the future. So this is a residential facility.
Right.
And I think that's all I wanted to be sure we were clear on with respect of that one point.
And it's my understanding that actually is written into the SPD.
Right. That's what Mr. Box has told me. And I had a question about a subsequent use, and I think one of the points that Mr. Box has stressed with me and the gentleman that I met with who was from Landmark earlier is that they met with the neighbors, and I think that was one of the concerns was that this was not going to be a facility that it was private pay, would not be drug referred, and that it wouldn't be a whole lot different than a nursing home, although the patient census may be demographics may be a little different. Although, I'm reading that the old people are really getting on the opioids too. So just saying. Could be the same thing before you know it.
So to your point about a drop-in methadone clinic, that's why we did add the further restriction within the body of the SPUD to the use unit to say the use is further restricted to prohibit the use of a, quote, drop-in medication, end quote, clinic. I believe that's a term of art in the industry. So we believe that gives the city all the power they need. If this group were to be gone for whatever reason, nobody could come in and operate a drop-in methadone clinic because of that. So in terms of the building, the existing building will be used fairly as is. The exterior will have very little. Obviously, there'll have to be some remodel work done on the interior of the building. But for the most part, it'll look as it does right now. So with that, we would ask for your approval. Again, we agree with all the TEs, except the TE3 has been modified to be the language that I read aloud earlier. So be happy to answer any additional questions.
Do I remember that if there are additional buildings constructed, that'll come to us in the form of a specific plan, or that we'll have some interaction with that? I mean, I know the intent is to use the existing building, right?
Yes, we can agree that if there's any additional, I'm not sure the site would allow it, but if there was, we could agree to come back with a specific plan or whatever you'd like. We can add that as a TE.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, comments? We do have someone signed up. Mr. Mullins, would you come forward for us, please?
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I'm not going to argue. The opioid epidemic is a crisis. Don't disagree with that. We need this facility. Do we need it here? I don't. My client is not convinced that we need it here because of the character of the neighborhood. Ma'am, could you please put up the site plan again for me? I don't know what slide it was.
I apologize to do this. I walked in 3 minutes late, so I missed. Who is your client?
Pardon?
Who is your client? I walked in just a few minutes
I'm
late.
sorry. MPMM Investments, LLC. They own property at on 23rd Street at 4704 Northwest 23rd, which has been a family-owned property since 1966, been redeveloped. They also own the property directly across the street from this at, I think it's 4836.
I'm sorry, across the street. South, north, east, west?
Sorry, Northwest 23rd, obviously east-west. Their property is 0.2 of a mile to the east and south. It's a strip center and a grocery store.
You say and, two different locations?
Yes, it's all on one, but there's two businesses that exist.
One is a grocery store and what is the other?
It's a Cash America pawn shop.
Pawn shop?
Correct. They're also redeveloping a lot directly across the street. I think the address is 4836, if I'm not mistaken. Tore down a building there and are in the process of, we've got another strip center, and it's kind of roughed in right now. So my clients have been in this neighborhood. They live in this neighborhood. They've invested in this neighborhood. They're reinvesting in this neighborhood. This property that Landmark is asking to rezone, they don't own yet. I don't know if that's relevant to your decision. If you look at the site plan, the only ingress and egress out of the property is on Northwest 23rd. The 23rd in Ann Arbor is just directly to the west. It's close to an intersection very close to their facility. You can have people making left turns and right turns out of there. In their information that you gave and that they handed out at the landowners meeting, they would talk about job description, and they have a column or a page called auto trips. They estimate 100 auto trips per day in and out of this facility. The only way in and out is on Northwest 23rd Street. Maybe I misunderstood what the gentleman said, but they have an intensive outpatient program, which means people come and go. And I'm sure they also have inpatient. They have meetings, according to this, throughout the day and they've numbered up the visits here. I don't know if it's on their 132 visits for intensive outpatient, 65 visits for clinic, family visits, 60 visits for extracurricular things, vendors, 25 total visits. That's a lot of traffic in and out of there. And I don't want to get into, we haven't had the chance to hire experts. I don't want to get into the parking situation, but from our count, there's maybe 39 or 40 parking spaces there. That's a lot of cars shuffling in and out and moving around. I would just like that this is a substantial change to the zone.
Why is it a substantial change? So from a use and density perspective, why does this represent such a substantial change from a, elder care nursing facility, the nursing home facility to the north? What makes this a substantial change?
One, thank you for the question. The memory care, those people aren't coming and going a lot, I wouldn't think.
I'm going to jump in. Do they have visitors? I mean, typically you have visitors, right?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, somebody is coming in and out.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I might jump in as well, just real quick. I know that you said you haven't studied the trips and the parking associated with the site, but city staff has, and they found it completely within the realms of the density of the neighborhood, the street network. So we do have, to some degree, recommendation in front of us that seems to fit.
And, that's what makes a horse race is a disagreement. But I think this is different in the memory care facility because you do have so much traffic coming and going. These people that will be coming, I mean, they stated in their materials what they'll be coming for, when they'll be coming. There's a grade school up Ann Arbor that's it's 3/10 of a mile away. The Windsor Hills Elementary, been there a long time. So with this new Windsor district, we love the sidewalks. Thank you for those. A lot of foot traffic in here. It's just, we would like, and I've been turned down already, we would like more time to thoroughly study this ourselves. I've heard what Landmark has said. I would like the chance to independently verify that. I should have been hired sooner. That's my client's fault. I should have been more prepared today. That's my fault. Haven't had that much time, but this is a substantial change to the zoning character of the neighborhood.
I'm going to jump in. Since you mentioned the time, did your client attend the neighborhood meeting and understand was held?
Yes, they did, and there were some concerns voiced. The revised plan, the one I received today, is stamped November 6th, received by the Planning Commission on the 6th. Was not available on the 30th, nor...
That's the revised SPUD?
Yes.
I think that was addressed as those revisions reflected some essentially more narrow use within the SPUD for what was there before. Was that the only change? Can someone address that?
I just received a copy of this.
I understand.
That's correct. The reason it was submitted after is because the revisions to the SPUD were a direct result of the concerns voiced by the neighbors.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't know if these restrictions are adequate or not. We have not been able to investigate thoroughly how this has gone in other areas. Their facility in Louisville is directly adjacent to medical facilities, hospitals, those sorts of things, if those services are needed. There's no hospital around here. We don't know that it's needed. There's a nursing home right up the street. That's long-term care. And been a good neighbor to the neighborhood. We just think this requires just a little bit more consideration, and would ask your indulgence in that.
I would say thank you for coming. I think, typically we encourage dialogue between the applicant and neighbors and protestants or those, and I would suggest that opportunity for dialogue, A, has occurred, and B, was attended. This is in my ward. No, it's not. It got moved to 3. Sorry. It used to be. I'm well familiar with the area. I'm not, and you know, I just don't see this use as causing additional traffic off of 23rd Street, a large arterial street that's designed to carry a lot of traffic onto Ann Arbor, which is a fairly well-traveled. I don't know what the classification would be, but there's traffic on Ann Arbor. There's commercial uses. There's a nursing home next door. There's a school in the area. This is an area where there's pretty significant traffic. The patients are residential, much like the assisted living center. There is visitor traffic. I don't know how many of you spent time going to an assisted living or some nursing facility, but they don't generate a lot of traffic during the day. And these, I don't see this use, since there's not much coming and going, based on the type of facilities and services that are being offered. I don't see it being a consideration any more than an emeritus facility or one of those. I just don't find that there's anything that any additional study would reveal to me that would change my view with respect to this particular application. I think it's a good land use. I don't think, as Scott said, we're not increasing the density, we're not increasing the traffic. Traffic's not particularly raised any particular concerns. There's 3 TEs in the application that are quite minor. I raised my concerns with and I know, Janice, you had an opportunity to do that also, and Mary. I think this is a good use, and I'm in favor personally, but go ahead. I don't see anything new here that says, stop, we ought to take another look at this.
I think we are sympathetic to the fact that you have been recently hired. But typically, when we, and force is not quite the right word, but when we, strong arm's not quite the right word, but when we encourage strongly applicants to continue cases when they are not so inclined, it's generally for one of 2 reasons. Either they have not reached out to the surrounding property owners, have not met and heard their concerns, and clearly that's not the case here. Not only did those meetings occur, but you know, some modifications were made based on the comments and concerns that were raised, or where there is a sort of an readily identifiable pre-existing condition, you know, where there's drainage issues or something like that that are long-standing, and we know there needs to be some additional work done. I have to say, I also have a hard time seeing this as a vastly different use than the use that was there, and have some hope, if that's quite the right word, that these kinds of uses can be found and made of facilities like this. I mean, it would be horrible if this building stood empty for another 10 years, I think. And so looking at it as an alternative, although nobody hopes that we need more drug and alcohol treatment facilities, the fact is that we do. And I have a hard time seeing this as a very, very different use. If your client had specific issues that they were inclined to go and pursue and develop, that might be one thing. But I haven't really heard anything today that makes me think that we need to strongly suggest a continuance here. There will be time. JJ, when is this likely to be heard by City Council?
Just one point that Scott raised.
Wait just a second.
Approximately 6 weeks.
So 6 weeks. I mean, there is some time between now and a decision, a final decision being made on our recommendation. So it's not like you will have lost that opportunity. I'm sorry.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt. So far as typical location, I would just highlight, and these are not nearly the same, and this use is far less intense in my mind, knowing what I know about it, but the referral center on 25th east of Classen offers a wide array of addiction facilities, including limited in-house facilities, and they are located in an area that is just off of a major arterial, much like this, an area that's close to residential uses, that's close to parks, that's close to several other type uses. So, and that's, again, I believe a more intense use because they have intake every day, and I think they do offer some outpatient facilities and other things. So that's an example of where similar, and I hate to say this is similar, I don't mean to paint one with the brush, but one that offers some sort of measure of treatment for that. And in fact, we granted the referral center their right for their inpatient beds here not long ago.
Comment?
Please, yes.
I don't know if you have in your materials, what I was handed is a letter that was sent out by Mr. Clifford Boyle, who's the principal. In that letter, I don't know if you all have, they had an attachment, auto trips and individual visitor estimates. They have auto trips at 100 per day. It's a lot of traffic. 287 total individuals per week.
Say that again, sorry. What was the last part?
They have outside visitors, approximately 287 total individuals per week. I don't think the...
per week?
Per week.
And you refer to those as both a lot? And your grocery store and your pawn shop that your client owns would have more or less than 100 visitors per day?
They are not at the intersection. They're more down the block. They have different egress. They have two different points of ingress and egress. They have a street, a north-south street directly adjacent, as well as Northwest 23rd.
And I understand that too. This is an existing facility.
Yes.
That's currently standing empty.
Yes.
The kinds of uses to which it could or would be put are somewhat limited. And so I think, as we look at whether this is an appropriate location for this use, I mean, that's really what we're here to decide. The fact that it has more or less traffic than a grocery store, I'm not sure is really at the point. I do want to ask you, however, about the access. He has said repeatedly that your only access is to 23rd Street. Is that accurate?
No, there's a parking area that's actually off of Ann Arbor as well. And the numbers that he gave are weekly counts.
Are, well...
Not daily.
Auto trips, 100 per day. That comes from the man that owns the company and started it.
Sure.
Those are his words.
Other trips, including staff, and they stagger based upon, what their parking is, when visitors come, and they're very regimented in when they bring in.
Well, I'm going to be a little bit more direct than I think my colleagues are. Okay, 100 auto trips a day on a major arterial street like this is not very many. This is a commercial area. There's plenty of infrastructure here. The staff report reflects that. I think to say that that's a reason not to allow this facility to be put to good use is a really bad argument in my view. And I certainly support the application as well. If that's the additional comment you have, I think we get that you're making an argument there. I can't agree with you. So,
to correct something Mr. Bach said, you can enter and exit the building on Ann Arbor. You cannot circumnavigate the building from 23rd to Ann Arbor or from Ann Arbor to 23rd. That's not possible.
I didn't understand him to say that, but...
Pardon?
I didn't understand him to say that.
And as far as, that's funny that you mentioned a building vacant for 10 years. That's exactly what Landmark did in Leominster, Massachusetts. So I don't know if we're going to wind up with a care facility or an eyesore. I don't know. But I appreciate...
We arguably have an eyesore now, sir. And I think that's the comment of having a vacant building in this location doesn't really serve the city's interest, and it doesn't really serve the property's interest long term.
Commissioners? I'm sorry? I haven't asked yet. Did you want to be heard?
I'd like to make the motion that this application be approved.
Before you do that, I will ask, is there anyone else here who wishes to be heard on this item today? I guess not.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 15. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item 16 is SPUD 1018 to rezone 211 Southeast 24th Street from R4 to SPUD 1018.
The applicant present? Could you give us your name and address for the record? You might pull that down just a little bit.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Bryant. The property is located at 211 Southeast 24th Street in Oklahoma City.
And tell us what it is you're seeking.
I am seeking for a ground to continue to keep my grounded signage that is located in front of my, well, I should say on the side of my residential property there. I have had a business there going on 18 years now, have had that sign there forever. The city came in and, you know, fined me. So they were like, well, you need to come and try to rezone that property. So that's what I'm up to doing today. I own the lots that is sitting on the side, on the east side of that property, as well as the resident. Before, ma'am, many years ago, that did not look nothing like that. I put a lot of years and dedication on getting this property, or getting this area looking the way that it is now.
The lots that we show as vacant, you own those as well?
That is correct.
I don't mean to, I guess, bypass the argument on this matter, but I was wondering at what point it would be possible for Ms. Bryant to get her money back on this application. I'll tell you honestly, I am not in favor of us doing PUDs and SPUDs for signage. I think that the signage that you're seeking approval for here is completely out of scale and would be inappropriate in any event, given where it is. The idea of a home occupation, I can well understand, and I am very supportive of, and I think, you know, that we can probably find some way for you to do live work or some other sort of approach to this, but I absolutely cannot support this particular approach. And so,
your question was?
If she decides to change her mind about this application now, is she still going to be entitled to get any of her money back?
50% of her original
filing. Because I understand it's not an inconsiderable
Can I say
amount
this,
of money.
ma'am?
Sure.
This area that I am located in is really in a provident to a low-income community. I know that what you're seeing today is a lot of hard work that I actually put in. It took many, many years to get this area to where you see it that maybe is, hey, this is like a really decent area. But there were many of old trees that took me years to have to cut down because I did not have the money. Once I got established, I had a choice. It's either stay where I'm at to make a difference for all the other young women that were single and had children in that community, that you can make it. You can start your own business. You can save your money. You can stay in your community and take pride in it. And like I said, that sign has been there. I tried 6 months not to have it, but a lot of people start thinking, oh, she must retire now. And it's been many years she's been there. I have a senior that's in school now, heading out into college, and I want to continue to give her the life that I've been giving her. And it's a big thing to me in that area. If I was somewhere different, I could really understand and respect it. But to come from a Provident, you guys, low-income area, people seeing this, that's motivation for other people to say, I can do it too. She has done it for many of years. I can.
Out of curiosity, if I could,
yes.
When I'm looking at your materials, there's a lot here. So this drawing right here that says sign.
That vacant lots?
Yeah, the vacant lot, hard up against the oil well. Is that where the sign was?
No. The sign is just right there on the, let's say, on the west side of my residence. That's just in the front.
Okay, so where's, go back.
Yes, right there.
Ah, okay, now I see.
Yeah, that's where that sign is located, right there.
Hangs on your fence?
Yes, it is.
No, not that one.
Oh, that one. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I had
that one right there is pulled, back. It's, adjacent, well, from my house to my rental properties next door. So basically, I'm pretty much owning that whole side except for that house that's on the corner. Again, I worked hard to get there because people just wasn't taking pride in the community. So I said I'd buy up the properties, try to fix them up. So that took 18 years to get it to where you see it today.
I think everyone up here, at least I certainly do, appreciate what you're saying and respect what you've done and what you're trying to do. I think the issue raised is one that is a sign of this size and significance appropriate for the area. So I don't think that anyone's saying that if the rezoning application were appropriate, that you shouldn't have a sign. I think it's a matter of the size and type of sign that you have that's creating some angst. And I have to say I agree with that. I think that it is a little bit of an issue. I don't know what the common ground is, but I guess I would encourage you to maybe think about, in accordance with your rezoning application, a sign that would be appropriate given the base zoning regulation and those sorts of things before your case was heard. That might be my suggestion.
I don't think anybody up here can look at what you have provided us with and not know that you're a very hardworking woman,
Absolutely.
very thorough, and that you take a lot of pride in what you do. I mean, lawyers have a saying that hard facts make bad law, and I think that's the case here. It's not that people, speak for myself, that I wouldn't want to do everything I could to help you succeed at what you're doing. I just don't think that I can get there with respect to the particular signage that you're presenting us with here in this area, in this very residential area. And again, I do have an issue with us using PUDs and SPUDs to do signage. So I would really strongly recommend that you maybe continue this case and work a little bit more with staff. I'll be happy to make myself available. I'm sure Pastor Cooper would too if he were here, to work with you and see if we can't work through this in a way that might be a little bit more palatable.
I'm happy to participate in that as well.
If you would be willing to do that.
Yes, thank you.
So you own the property all the way up to the oil well, right?
That is correct, sir.
And where the stockade fence runs inside that, the stockade fence.
And I put that stockade fence up as well.
You put that up? I had some fences around my house. No. Okay. All right. I think we ought to continue.
So how long shall we, well, I guess it's going to have to be a month because we have, our next meeting is December 14th, is that right? Is that agreeable to you?
Yes.
We're not going to keep citing.
No.
Okay.
It looks like the sign's down. Is it the sign down now, or is it?
No, that sign went right back up.
Well, you may get cited again. I'm just giving you a heads
It's on file, they won't be doing that.
No.
will they?
Is that
No,
right,
I
JJ? That's correct? We're not going to issue...
As long as she's working towards a resolution.
Okay.
We'll stay anything.
Yeah, I think we're good with that.
Could I just clarify, too, for staff who will be working on helping refine this, is that the commission's request is that we work on the amount of signage that would be allowed for this use?
Or, that's not our...
Type and amount.
We'll see.
Type and amount.
Or whether there is another type of classification or category for the use that maybe could get her there with what she's needing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for further clarification, the rezoning proposal is not just because she needs signage, it's to make the business use conform so that she may have employees, because a home business occupation use, if you're not putting signs up or you're not having employees, can happen in a residential setting. But this business was being elevated to the level that you did want to provide signage. So it's making the use conform as well as allowing a certain percentage signage. Is that correct, JJ? And that's why SPUD was recommended. Okay. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay. That is, okay, yes. Glad to hear that. That's not entirely clear from the staff report, so. We're going to continue your case until December the 14th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
A motion and second to continue item number 16 until December the 14th.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, yes, let's vote. I'm sorry. Would you cast your votes, please? It is continued.
Item number 17 is PUD 1659 to rezone 3801 South Post Road from PUD 1429 to PUD 1659.
Tony Masato, home address is 12425 Steve Drive. We're proposing to take our existing nursery and landscape business and expand it west with the land that we currently own to create a dog park and a boarding facility.
I understand that you had an existing PUD here, and this alteration is doing nothing but adding that as a supplemental use.
It would replace the initial one.
But there's no other changes to your preceding PUD. Is that accurate?
No.
Okay.
And so I will say, because you've heard me say the opposite at times, in this particular case, I think that the uses that are listed in the existing PUD are appropriate to the property. So the idea of doing this kind of a change to simply add a use rather than revisit all of that makes sense to me. So, is there anybody else here who wants to be heard on this matter? Do I have a motion? Do I have questions, comments, concerns? No?
I've got one question. When was the site cleared?
We've been there, February was our 5th year, and we started building about a year in advance, so 6 years ago we started the building process.
The only reason I ask is we've got one environmentally sensitive area comment that says that at some point it did have upland forest that was cleared. We try to preserve our upland forest. And
Well, if you call cedar trees an upland forest, I guess, yes, that's all we had on the property, and there's only one left of probably tens of thousands.
Okay.
I believe they've added ponds there too, and some other landscaping.
Oh, absolutely.
The whole site looks much better than it used to.
Anybody else? Anyone else want to be heard on this matter? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 17. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 18 was continued to December 14th. Item 19 is PUD 1661 to rezone 10801 South May Avenue from PUD 136 to PUD 1661.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. With me is a host of folks with the development team and the operator that can explain any operational type use you might have. What we're seeking to do today is rezone this to a PUD from what is straight C3 in a relatively old PUD that was approved in 1984 to a PUD that would allow a senior living center. Where we are is a southwest May and 104th, specifically just north of Earlywine Boulevard. We did have an opportunity to meet with several neighbors on the HOA board about a week or two ago, and we were able to come to a resolution. So there are a handful of TEs that I'll get into, but I would like to focus on some of the issues that the neighbors had. The neighbors struck a deal with Crest when the Crest was built several years ago right there at 104th and Earlywine to require Crest to build a wall along the backside of their property. The neighbors were very concerned that we provide some sort of wall as well, and that was a point that we spent a lot of time discussing. So what my client eventually ended up agreeing to is something that the neighbors are now happy with. You'll see in this rendering, we have currently existing this brick wall right here on the corner that maintains a neighborhood sign for this neighborhood. It's there without an easement. They were very concerned that someday a developer would come and their neighborhood identification sign would be gone. And so my client, through this process, has agreed to grant them the easement, and we will address that in the PUD so that their neighborhood identification sign can remain on my client's property. It's a very pretty area with a lot of brick, and so what we've done is we've maintained that brick throughout. You'll notice we do have two wing-walled entrances here now that are brick. The neighbors initially were concerned about the access drive location here. We do need 2 access drives for fire safety. But with the addition of the wall and the addition of us keeping their sign and granting them that permission, they were fine with the access point here. So all that considered, you did have a protest letter in your packet. As of, I believe, Tuesday, the neighbors have submitted a withdrawal of their protest, and they are now in favor of this development. As I said, there were a host of TEs I'd like to address. We are fine with TE 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'd ask that TE 6 be deleted. We've submitted detailed elevations, site plans. I believe JJ is okay with that now. Everything you'd see in a specific plan is what you're seeing here today. As you know, the specific plan process is when perhaps there's not a lot of certainty in what will be built. You're getting to see it right here. So we'd ask that TE 6 be deleted. TE 7 we are in agreement with, but we'll need to modify it. What it's asking for is that the document account for the neighborhood identification sign, which I discussed here. Right now, our document maintains a wall sign on the brick wall here. We need to maintain, or we need to account for the neighborhood sign here, and then we'd like to add, these are 25 square foot signs on that brick wing wall. So we'd like to modify TE 7 to provide for those 4 wall signs. And finally, TE 8 is there are 2 existing non-accessory signs that are kind of smaller wood frame signs. It asks to remove those, and we are in agreement with that. So with that, we were happy that we were able to have the opportunity to meet with the neighbors. It was a very good discussion, and ultimately one that resolved or ended up in a much better position for everybody. So with that, we'd ask for your approval. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Could your property owner discuss the difference between a major entrance and a minor entrance? I mean, how is the entrance off of Earlywine Boulevard going to be different from the entrance off of May Avenue?
It might be that Mr. Box would be better able to answer that question than his client.
Yeah, Mr. Box can answer.
Sure. Okay. So we anticipate a greater number of trips through the May Avenue, but we do need 2 points of access for fire safety. You know, when you'll notice it looks like kind of a ring road on the top of our site plan. That was as a direct result of meeting with Mike Wilson in the fire marshal's office. So to be able to get to the back piece of the building, they needed that. Likewise, what you see on the southwest portion of the site is the same thing. So we need 2. Obviously, we believe that the majority of the traffic is going to come off of May Avenue, not Earlywine, I wouldn't imagine that people would come from 104th all the way down. You're more likely to do so. When major versus minor, I think May Avenue being, I believe it's probably major arterial.
But there's no difference in the look of the entrances. Is that what you're saying? It's totally up to the person coming in to make the decision whether they come in off of May or come in off of Earlywine Boulevard. There's no reason that...
I'm not sure I follow, although the May Avenue entrance will have the freestanding monument sign, whereas here we've got, you know, I hope that answered.
Yeah.
Typically, when there are exhibits like this attached to an application, there is some indication that they are conceptual only, and so when you're offering the level of detail as a substitute, if you will, for a specific plan, the concern that I have is with respect to how committed we are to what we're seeing, and that's a question I'm going to ask staff, since he says you're okay with this. Is the level of detail that we have commitment to sufficient to substitute for a specific plan?
If they want to opt out of the specific plan, they will build what they've shown here.
So,
here we are.
Are you ready to make that commitment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And how high is the wall along Earlywine Boulevard?
Along Earlywine? $5'6". Yes, sir. Originally, it was just going to be landscape. But as part of the agreement with the neighbors, this is the plan that is part of that agreement. So, yeah, it'll be a mixture of brick columns, wrought iron, and then a lot of landscaping.
What about the school bus stop? Where will the school bus, will they come in and stop there at Brookline, or will you discuss with the Moore School District to change that bus stop?
Yeah, we'll do whatever's necessary. The neighbors did raise that issue, and so if that becomes an issue, we'll be happy to visit with who we need to make sure that all the parties are properly accommodated. Typically, school districts are willing, or the bus drivers are willing to find a new stop.
I'm sorry, what's the deal with the bus stop?
As of now, the bus stop is right around Brookline. The neighbors were concerned that it would cause a kind of a blockage of traffic, and so perhaps we can move, get with the school district and have them move the bus stop to one of the cross streets, just slightly to the west.
Is there anybody else here who wants to be heard on this matter today? Commissioners? Comments, questions, a motion?
Move approval of the application.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 19. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 20 was deferred to December 14th. Item 21 is SPUD 1007 to rezone 1140 Northwest 13th Street from R3 to SPUD 1007.
Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a case that was continued, I believe, from your last hearing. I was not hired at the time. I was hired shortly after that last meeting. I think that, frankly, provides me a little bit of a benefit in that I've not been involved in this project. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of perhaps frustration on both sides of the aisle with this project. And so when I was hired, I had the benefit of not being involved in that and had a fresh perspective. And so when I sat down to look at it, the thing that struck me was this was properly permitted under the R3 zoning district, meaning it could operate as a rental unit in perpetuity. The purpose of this SPUD is to allow this to be platted and sold as individual lots. It strikes me that that is a better long-term solution for the neighborhood to have people that are going to own these units that will have a stakeholding interest in the neighborhood. But with that said, there were some issues to be resolved with both my client and the neighbors. I know Ms. Powers spent an evening at my office with the neighbors and my client, and were able to, I believe, come to a resolution. I know Commissioner Highsmith spent an afternoon with all the parties. So what we've done now is submitted a new site plan. We have increased the number of landscaping points. We've specifically shown where landscaping is going to be. We're going to have evergreens on the north side of both the north building and the south building, a significant number of trees throughout. There was a concern about having a line of demarcation from the sidewalk into the parking area. So what we've agreed to do is a 3-inch cut in the concrete and backfill that with granite, similar to the cuts in the concrete throughout the rest of the parking area, provide kind of a modern type look. Additionally, we've included some new exhibits to the SPUD to show how we're going to block the AC units. I know the AC units and their visibility from Klein was a concern by several people on this horseshoe. So what we've agreed to do is do a fence, and that fence will be stained cedar, and the fence will be horizontal slats that will screen those units. We have included the images that we had in the neighborhood meeting. We've included that as an exhibit to the SPUD, and it's my belief as of, I believe, late yesterday, that the site plan and those new exhibits, the neighbors are now as happy as they can be, given the circumstances, and my client is in the same position. So I think what we have now is a workable SPUD that everybody has signed off on. There are a handful of technical evaluations. All of them we can't agree to. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Randy Hill is also here, who's the engineering firm on the project.
There were just a couple of specific things I wanted, in addition to the fencing and the delineation of the sidewalk edge and increased landscaping. There were just a handful of other things that were of concern to the neighbors that were addressed and resolved. There's not going to be any signage on this property. There are not going to be any dumpsters on this property. And there are going to be individual mailboxes for these units rather than, a station of mailboxes.
All of which have been drafted into the SPUD.
What type of screening is going to be provided for the AC units?
Sure. It is a, Cindy, do you have the Exhibit F to the SPUD? I can hand it out.
The horizontal kind of...
Yeah, horizontal stained cedar fence with some separation between the two.
That's required by the SPUD?
That's correct.
Okay.
So it is required to be consistent with Exhibit F, and what I handed you is Exhibit F to the SPUD.
And there were other options discussed, but this is the one that was kind of agreed in the end. Is there anybody present who wants to be heard on this matter? Commissioners?
I move approval of the item.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 21 with the various amendments and modifications as discussed. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
And item 22 is the accompanying plat, C-6947, final plat of the Klein.
Again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This is the plat. There are two TEs, both of which we agree to. And that's my only copy of Exhibit F. Could I grab that back?
Move approval.
Second.
Is there anybody who wishes to be heard on this matter? This is kind of the easy piece of this. I have a motion and a second to approve item number 22. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 23 is a comp plan amendment, CPA 2017 number 8. This is to remove the agricultural preserve layer and change the base land use typology area from rural low to rural medium intensity at West Memorial Road and North Frisco Road. And Susan Atkinson from the Planning Department is here to explain the case and answer any questions you might have.
Good afternoon. Again, this is CPA 2017-0008. So the request is an application for, to amend the comprehensive plan and again remove the agricultural preserve layer, changing the land use typology from rural low intensity to rural medium intensity. And this has associated PUD applications as noted below. This is an 80-acre tract, and the underlying zoning would change from agricultural to residential. Here is the subject site in the context of the entire city. These are the existing conditions, the surrounding LUDAs as noted here. The site is largely surrounded by rural medium intensity on the northeast and to the east, and then agricultural preserve to the west, southwest, and northwest. The existing conditions and land use, largely surrounded by undeveloped land. There is activity occurring in the general vicinity, as indicated here, large lot residential, rural residential, and there is a school to the northeast of the subject site. Regarding environmentally sensitive areas, these are shown in blue on the map. There is a small percentage of the site that does have a riparian zone, as indicated in the northeast corner of the site. It's a small creek that feeds a pond. With respect to available services, this site is now adjacent to public water. There is no nearby public wastewater, and the site is on the edge between the urban and rural response times for fire services. And again, that's a graphic depiction of the fire services access. The nearest station is 2.5-ish miles to the east-southeast. So the reason the site was designated as rural low with an agricultural preserve were, first of all, at the time of the comp plan's adoption, it was outside of water and wastewater service areas. The site was also, again, at the edge between urban and rural response times for fire. And the prevailing development patterns around the site were undeveloped, agricultural, and low density. So the considerations for changing the LUDA, recent development in the area has shifted the character from agricultural toward residential. Urban levels of water service are now available to this site, and the site has a reasonable proximity to a fire station. So it is the recommendation, staff's recommendation, that you adopt the resolution changing the land use typology from rural low intensity with agricultural preserve to rural medium intensity.
So, just so I'm clear, the surrounding property, we're just changing this to carving this one little piece out of the AP area.
That is correct.
And conform, and I don't mean to say conforming in the plan sense, but basically mirroring the uses that surround that on all the north and east, right?
Yeah, there are uses, there are residential uses occurring sporadically around the subject site.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And so, okay, and then the water and utility service is basically there now, right?
Water service is now there, not sewer.
Sewer. Okay. All right. Thank you.
based on a change in condition. Why do we care more about water than we do sewer? Does anybody have an answer for that question?
For rural development, that typically will do a septic system, and sewer is not available. Water allows you to be more efficient to tap into the city's water service and develop at a little bit higher density than you would if you wanted to space wells across a rural area. So one of our considerations for allowing a little bump in density to go to that rural medium is that they may not have all services available, but they may have access to city water but not sewer, or they may have better fire service. So that way they can get that 1 unit per 2 acres in over where we would typically like to see 1 unit per 5 acres in the low density areas.
Okay.
Urban.
Okay. Is there anybody else here who wants to be heard on this matter? Commissioners?
There's no other comments. I'll move approval of the plan amendment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 23. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Just in time for item 24, which is a rezoning request, PUD 1662 to rezone 13400 West Memorial Road from AA to PUD 1662.
Good afternoon. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Also with me today is Jason Johnson, who's the developer, and Kendall Dillon, who is the civil engineer. This is the PUD that led to the request to modify the comp plan. This is an area that Kendall and I also, I believe it was Kendall, maybe it was Jason. I'll give Kendall credit. 2 years ago, this Planning Commission approved the development you see right here labeled Timber Ridge. Those are 1 acre lots. And what we've done is mirror this PUD to that PUD. So what you'll have is 1 acre lots. You can see there's a large pond there in the middle. So, and here is the layout. The plat is the next item. So with that, with the comprehensive plan now being changed, what we have is a development consistent with the development pattern in the area, but specifically the development immediately north of this. There is no protest that I'm aware of. I know that there were a handful of support letters that were submitted to me that I forwarded on to staff.
Did you say this PUD mirrors the one to the north?
Yes.
That's what, okay.
Yeah, that's a 1 acre development, and just like this one, 1 acre minimum lot size. So with that, we'd ask for your approval. There are a couple of TEs, 4 to be exact, and the way that your staff report is worded is in the alternative if the comp plan is approved, if it's not. So under 1, we are in agreement with A, C, and D. On B, instead of a gross density of 0.5, what we'd ask for is 0.59. That's exactly what we have submitted. It's 0.88 on the north side of the road that we got approved earlier, so the 0.59 reflects the PUD that's submitted before you.
Okay, so you want to increase B to 0.59?
Yes, sir.
All right.
And we agree with the rest of the TEs.
Anybody signed up? Anybody want to speak on this?
Is there anybody present who wants to be heard on this matter?
I'll move approval of the application.
Second.
Changing 1B to 0.59 versus 0.5.
Second.
I'm sorry, this is why I'm not responding. I actually did have a question, and it's maybe more of a question to staff. My staff report notes that the side yard setbacks here are significantly shallower than the predominant character of the adjacent development. And when I see notes like that, I always wonder to myself, is this something I should care more about than I do? And does it have some significance that I ought to be taking more seriously?
I think that in this case, we are giving you our assessment of the area, and the fact that it doesn't ask you to increase, doesn't lead to a TE that we're recommending larger setbacks, that it would not if I rise to that occasion. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And then the other question has to do with, and I'm guessing that's the reason that we're amending TE 1B, that there also is a comment that the plan policy calls for lots between 2 and 4 acres. These are between 1 and 1.8 acres. Is that why we're altering the TE to bring that into? Okay. All right. I'm back on this track here. So do I have a motion and a second and to approve item number 24? And it is approved.
And item 25 is the accompanying preliminary plat, KC 6937 for the lakes at Timber Ridge.
For the last time, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. This is the plat for the PUD, and there are 5 TEs. I believe we can delete TE number 3. We're no longer going to be requesting that variance. So with that, we agree with TEs 1, 2, 4, and 5, and we will conform to the subregs and not need the variance on TE 3.
I'm sorry. That all just went right by me. You need a variance on TE number 3, do we or not?
We don't. We're going to conform, so
Okay.
we don't need a variance.
Okay.
You're adding the stub.
Just to be clear, that TE affects the west and south. You okay?
Good. All right, so then we'll, go ahead.
Is there anyone present who wishes to be heard on this item? Apparently not.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve item 25, deleting TE3 as the developer has confirmed that they will conform with the subdivision regs and provide stubs to the west and south.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item number 25 with the deletion of item TE number 3, with the understanding that the developer is going to comply with requirement for stubs. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item 26 is SPUD 1015 to rezone 5936 Broadway Extension from C3 to SPUD 1015.
Madam Chairman, members of the Commission, Brian Kuhn, representing the applicant. Got a handout I'd like to hand out real quick. This application before you today is on Broadway Extension, just south of 63rd Street on the east side of Broadway Extension. So the minute you go past I-44, if you're going northbound, this sign is on the north side of that, and just on the east side. There's I think it's called the Roadway Inn Motel right there, which is just south of that motel. Currently, we have a permit, which I don't think it showed up in the staff report. We currently have a permit for a 10 by 30 level 1 EMD billboard that is 50 feet high. And so what I did with these exhibits, that's the first page of that exhibit shows what that sign looks like if it's a 10 by 30 sign, 50 foot high. So what we're requesting is to just be competitive with other billboards in the area, which there's another map in there that shows where the other signs are in the area. What we're requesting is a 14 by 48 billboard, but we're going to lower the height 10 feet. And so the second exhibit that you have shows that comparison as to what those look like. I don't know that I need to show you, but that's just this exhibit here. A couple other things that you have in there, and when I did talk with the councilman about this, it's been at least a month ago, his main concern was what's going to be seen from the neighbors to the east. We're over 950 feet to the property line of the residences on Braniff. I think that's called Braniff Drive in that neighborhood over there. So it's almost 1,000 feet to any homes. And so you also have one of the exhibits in there that shows this is a double-sided billboard. It's one of those that's kind of a V-shaped, that the face of the billboard doesn't even face the homes. And that's one of his concerns, was that these people won't see it. It's very heavily wooded behind those homes. So to be able to see that would be just about impossible, plus the elevations. One other thing that I wanted to show you that we have not, it's not included in the packet, but it's just a land plan of what we've done for this area. It just kind of shows you where it is. This is the motel I was talking about up here to the north end. Broadway Extension's right here. I-44 is right here. Santa Fe is here. So someday, third-story office park could be commercial. This property is currently zoned C3, straight C3. One of the things in your staff report, and it is also owned by multiple owners. So it's not like we can package it all in one deal. So, but I just wanted to make that clear also. One of the things, I don't want to be a smart aleck, but I figured out where Mr. Bright is when I saw the comment of let's come back and do a spud on this whole thing. We've heard that many times from him as well. Let's back up and do a spud. We really don't want to give up our C3 zoning. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is a highly visible piece of property. It's getting ready to change out there with I-44 and what's happening with Santa Fe. So we would like to keep our straight C3 zoning. You'll see site plans, of course, when that comes through. But with that, we'd like to request approval of the sign. Again, I think the lowering of the height of 10 feet is significant there. It is up on a hill now. And as you can see by those exhibits, it kind of shows what that would do to lower it by 10 feet. I know a lot of people don't like billboards, but they are necessary. One of the things that Whistler does is they make these billboards available for public service announcements. And I think that's one of the things we've put in there for Amber Alerts or whatever. So Whistler's a local company. Some of the other billboards aren't. So anyway, just we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I got a question.
Okay.
The 14 by 48?
Yes.
You know, you show a map of the other signs in the area.
Yes.
How does that compare to them?
They're all the large size, 14 by 48.
That's very typical size
That's
for that.
the typical largest, that's the largest billboard you can get in Oklahoma City. And the other four that are north, there's one north, south, there's one east and west of here. Those are both the large, the 14 by 48s.
I spoke to Mr. Kuhn about this application a few days ago, and although my initial reaction was that I wasn't sure, I was inclined one way or the other with respect to the trade-off of size to height. But there is an aspect to this that I want to make sure that you're aware of. I mean, first of all, the city does sort of have a long-standing policy to get rid of billboards whenever it can, by attrition, if no other way. Here, the property is zone C3, and that means that they are entitled to a 10 by 30 billboard on the property as a conditional use. One of those conditions, or maybe the only condition, is that if the property is developed, the billboard has to be removed. If we rezone this property and permit this billboard, and I've already given my little speech about using PUDs and SPUDs for signage, but if we do that, then they will have the ability to keep that sign there. Not only will it be bigger and shorter, but it'll be there forever. I mean, it'll be permitted by the zoning it has. So I cannot support this. And I just want you to be aware that there's a little bit more to what's at stake here than just size and height. It's you know, forever versus until the property develops. So, is that fair?
It's fair, but if we do the spud, as is requested by the staff, then it would be in there forever also. So it's kind of a, you've asked me to do the spud, and we talked about whether you would support at that point. That didn't really help the case any. So we just felt like lowering the height is a concession from what's out there now. I'm not sure about the conditional use, and you may have to answer that too. This sign was permitted also because of the ODOT taking of some right-of-way. So it all kind of happened at the same time. So I'm not sure about the details of whether it goes away if the property is developed or not. I wasn't aware of that until you said that. So I have not had time to research that legally to see if it really does go away if it's developed. Of course, before we get to council, we'll sure find that out. But I'm not sure if it's a typical conditional use to C3 because it was granted after they took right away. So.
Would it be something else? Is there some reason why it wouldn't be a typical C3 right away? I mean,
I'm not saying it is or isn't. I just said I haven't had time to research it. I didn't hear any of that. I'm sorry. What she is saying is that this billboard that's permitted in this C3, straight C3, once the property is developed, it has to go away. Okay, that's a conditional use under the C3
It's one of the conditions for
Okay.
a sign.
This billboard was granted and permitted as part of a case when ODOT took the right-of-way off the west side of this property. So I'm not sure if the permit was acquired through normal procedures or just whatever. So when you said that yesterday or Tuesday when we talked, I thought, I don't know that that's the case, that it'll go away. You know, these companies typically don't build a billboard that's going to go away. And yes, we want to develop the property. So I don't know about that. So I do understand.
You want to give us some time to go find out?
Well, I don't know if it really makes any difference. I think we want a 14 by 48 sign. So I don't know that makes any difference to us today. We will definitely find out before council, so that we find out if we walk away without getting approved. We know we have a 10 by 30, but it's going to go away when we develop property. So again, as our discussion, even if we do the SPUD, and I show you this as a potential what we're going to do, there's really no uses that we want to give up in C3 because of this location. 63rd and Broadway Extension is a very high traveled area, so we really don't, and the SPUD usually is what you're doing that for, on the site plan.
And frankly, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, the client doesn't want to know what he wants to do with the property other than that he wants to put a sign on it. So the idea that we would, do a SPUD or on the property, that would be just a shall SPUD, because they don't know what they're doing with it anyway, so.
Well, but, I mean, it's essentially, what would the alternative be to coming in for a SPUD to get that?
To get what?
To get the sign the way he wants it, 14 by 48.
We originally were going to go to the Board of Adjustment. And when I talked to the Councilman Pettis, we just talked about, let's bring it before this board and bring it in front of City Council. Gives me a chance to talk about things with different people also, which I can't do at the Board of Adjustment. So there's two ways, Board of Adjustment or through this procedure here. So that's we chose this.
And there is some concern that the precedent there has been go through the legislative process for certain things. Don't try and, circumvent that. So that's the other side of the argument. We're at the intersection of I-44 and the Broadway extension.
Yes.
And there are how many other billboards complying with spacing requirements along that corridor that meet the exact same standard you're asking for today?
If you look at this exhibit that I put in your packet,
corner except
there is one back here, almost at 50th. There's one back here that's almost to the railroad tracks. Okay? There's one over here by Deep Fork Creek, about halfway before you get to I-35 junction. And then there's one north that's, you can see here's, let's see, this would be 63rd Street here. So it's
basically due west of you.
Due west of the site. And they're the same size, but they're higher. These are all 50-foot high.
You don't have to like it, but to me the application makes a lot of sense. People want billboards on these types of corridors for obvious reasons. It's in line. It doesn't exceed what surrounds it. I understand why you're bringing the application. I don't necessarily have a problem with the application, but I don't know what the alternative would be to bringing it here, that this wouldn't be the appropriate venue for it.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not. That was not my point at all.
So I'd like to ask about the staff recommendation to include the entire development site. What is the rest of the development? I'm not understanding what else is part of the development.
This tract of land that this group owns, and like I said, this property is split up into several ownerships. This has been all of this is owned by part of this partnership. It's been owned by the Porters for a long time. No, not forever, but probably since God put it there. It's been there. They've owned it for a long time. So they want, with what's happening over here on Santa Fe, which is going to be improved greatly, they just see that now's the time that they could possibly develop that. So they had Frankfurt Short Bruiser do a land plan. This isn't something just to show you to make it look pretty.
Well, it would be irresponsible to not, no landowner who owns a swath of land like that wouldn't have some idea about what they're going to do before they bring a sign application that, again, in my view, is perfectly appropriate. I mean, that's what you do. You plan for a use that you can make economic value of the site today, and you look at what use you're going to have tomorrow. It's a perfectly logical location for straight C3. I don't see that the SPUD changes anything, except we're allowing a sign that already conforms with what's existing.
Well, it seemed like the main point from my interpretation...
Around it. Not what's around it.
It seemed like the main point from my interpretation that was spoken of earlier is how long the sign stays there. In one version, in C3, it has to go away if the site is developed.
Which is crazy.
No, it's not. That's the conditional use.
Well, I understand, but that's if that were true, let's say that were true for a second, that would even be a greater support for him coming to seek the SPUD in lieu of that potential thing hanging over him would be if he wants to build that sign, no one's going to build that sign and have it possibly go away in 10 years. You can't, it makes no economic sense at all.
Aubrey, could I ask what planning department's position is on signage like this?
The reason that the staff recommendation was written the way it was because our ordinance that talks about when PUDs and SPDs are appropriate, it's when you have a larger consolidated land area with a development proposal that needs to deviate from basic zoning standards. So you can evaluate the whole thing together as a master plan development. It also says don't seek an SPUD or PUD if you just want to waive a sign regulation. So we really didn't have a tool even within the zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan to just look at this small site for one specific thing, which is a billboard sign. So we don't have comp plan policies to apply. But if it came in as part of a larger proposal, the sign was a part of a PUD, then we can evaluate it per the comp plan and per the zoning code. So that's where that staff report, that's why the recommendation was made.
And again, the city has a long-standing policy, getting rid of billboards when it gets the chance. Attrition being, the easiest way to do that.
But this is a new sign.
Yeah.
10 foot smaller than it could be, height. So you're really not getting rid of one.
Well, if it's zone C3.
If it goes away with the conditional use,
and it's
yes.
eventually developed.
I understand.
Then,
I'm just, yeah.
Okay, so that's where we are.
This whole thing about this somewhat convoluted process where we force a developer to go do this PUD, this SPUD. I know it's not forcing it, but I agree that it is somewhat artificial that we deprive. I'm not crazy about billboards either. Don't get me wrong. It's not a question of whether you like a billboard. I'm just curious that it seems like you force this fiction, if you will, upon ourselves with this condition that, Brian's guys aren't going to get up there.
We're not forcing this. They want something.
I get that. But
They want a bigger sign than they're entitled to.
I get, true. But we're going to get a billboard. We're going to get a billboard.
So they've come through this process to try to make that
I
change.
understand that, but it is still a fiction because one way or the other, we're forcing these guys to come do something to keep that use. It doesn't matter, Janice, what you think, but it is an economic coercion because you force these guys to come back in to keep their sign that they've been granted at some point. They're 10 by 30, 12 by 30 because they've got to carve it out of the development. At some point, they've got to come in for SPUD because they can't give it up.
Michael, I'm not following you because you're saying to keep the sign they have. They have a sign. They can keep it now.
At 10 by 30.
Right.
But if you go with Janice's interpretation, the point being, and she's said before, as others have on this commission, they've said, look, we don't like an SPUD for just a sign, right? So if the interpretation is that that the sign goes away the minute we start turning spades down there, putting development up, then effectively we've forced this ask, or they have to give up their sign. They have to get, but we tell everybody we don't like single-use SPUDs for signs. So there's some back history on this, but I think that's where we are right now. If I'm missing something.
Well, and my point about that is, if this were a situation where, they actually had a plan for the development of the property, if they knew what they wanted to do with it, that would be one thing. So I have a question. Do we know whether this location meets a 1,200-foot separation requirement?
I don't know specifically if it does. He would not be able to get a permit if it didn't. So I'm sure
Wouldn't be able
Brian's
to get a
looked
permit
at that
from
already.
whom? And you say you have your permit, don't you?
We have a permit for the 10 by 30. Then yes, he does. Neither. Right.
Okay. Would it be different if it were larger, or that doesn't affect that? Okay, so I have to push back, Michael. I cannot agree with the characterization that we are forcing them to do anything.
We may not be. This commission may not be. But the economics of the transaction force that result. They do. It doesn't matter if you're a developer, you're not giving up a billboard. And, there's a risk here if it seems to me, about this SPUD, right? If we approve the 14 by 48, aren't you still subject to the development conditions under your C3? Brian? My concern is this.
No.
We give you a bigger sign. If you're right, he goes and develops it, or is this just the SPUD that carves it out?
This is the SPUD that carves it out.
Okay.
Now,
All right.
I think, it's my job to help developers develop property. I think you could come back and develop part of this property as C3, and the sign could stay. You don't have to develop the whole property. So I'm not trying to argue with you there, but I think I could just not develop the north 50 feet of it, and I'd be fine.
I agree. The current sign could stay.
Yeah, the one that's permitted.
Is that accurate?
Right.
If he doesn't develop the north 50 feet, the sign stays?
If he can keep the sign on a parcel that has street frontage and meets the minimum lot width and size requirements, yes. He could deed approval, shove it out for the sign.
The point you've made, though, is I think what Janice is saying, which is he's not forced to do anything. He can keep his sign, you can develop, you can have both, and we're not forcing you to have a bigger sign. You can keep your sign, you can get a spot on the rest of the property. So I don't think I'm not following you how we're forcing him to do anything.
But he has to come in for this SPUD,
For
potentially, for the billboard.
He just said, no, he doesn't.
He could keep his sign.
JJ doesn't. Per JJ, that's not what I understood.
That's what he just said.
That he doesn't have to. That he doesn't have to.
Yeah. I've got a permit right now for 10 by 30.
Right.
And with the C3, if it's conditional use of the C3, if I develop the whole property, what you're saying is that the sign would go away. What I'm saying is I could have a permit now for 10 by 30. I could develop this southern 90% in C3, and my sign would stay if I had to figure out how to make it work.
If that's true, I can't do anything about that.
I understand. So really the issue is, today is we would like a 14 by 48 sign, permanent, 10 foot smaller, 10 foot less height than what's we've got permitted. I know people don't like billboards. I've been in a lot of these meetings too, and I've heard those comments.
So I'm going to come back, though, to the staff recommendation that is when you have because you're not bringing us this development for proposal yet, but when you bring that, you can include in it what size of sign you want and get it as part of the SPUD. Is that right?
Well, no, because I don't have to come back to you to get any more zoning after today for this building. I've got current straight C3.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have to be back.
Distinguishing it, by the way, from the few meetings ago when there was a recommendation from the staff that the applicant include the whole development before we would approve a zoning change. And so this is distinct from that because you would not need to come back to us for this. So I'm trying to figure out until you have the entire development ready, whether we should be continuing it for that reason or not.
It was just a way to address the fact that we can't evaluate a postage stamp for an EMD sign according to the comprehensive plan, but we can if it's part of a larger development site. So I guess what it's down to is if the commission supports the 10 by 30 versus the 14 by 48. That's the difference.
Not to confuse this further, but one last question on billboard signs. Outside of C3, is the same thing that we've been talking about applicable?
Condition?
Yeah, that should a site be developed and it be wherever else billboards are allowed, that it would come down with development?
Are there any zoning categories where non-accessory signs are actually a use by right?
Yes, it's allowed in I-2, and then you have to, of course, meet spacing requirements.
So if you have I-2 property and can meet your spacing requirements, they're allowed by right. Otherwise, if they're allowed, they're only allowed as conditional uses.
And in those instances, they would come down with further development per the conversation.
Or you could do a PUD. You could do a PUD
Okay.
on your total property and get that conditional use as a approved use. That way, because you're not going to do it, build it knowing that a year from now I'm going to tear it down. So there's ways to get that set at the start, right?
Madam Chairwoman, with Commissioner Cooper not here today and it's his word, when you're prepared, I'm prepared to make a motion unless there's anything else.
Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this matter today? No? I don't think so. So I think
Well, I
we're ready
appreciate
for
the
a motion.
explanations by you and the staff. Oh, there was, I'm sorry, I missed it. Okay, I'm sorry, I missed it, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Sean Whistler, and I own Whistler Media, and we were the recipient of the permit. So the question was, an industrial, it's not a conditional use, right? It's a use by right. And so, and in that case, it wouldn't have to come down. In this case, there's some other considerations. And from our perspective, obviously, we were permitted by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and by the City of Oklahoma City to build a 50-foot tall sign that's 300 square feet, and it's digital. So a couple things. When I turned 45 recently, I noticed my eyesight's gone, so I'm now using readers. But kind of nationally, that 14 by 48 is considered the standard size interstate billboard. When you have a 350-foot wide right-of-way from the driving surface to the sign face, that's the standard size. That plays in for a couple reasons, but one, that 300 square foot sign nationally is known as a surface street, like junior billboard. So one of the things that you get into is the readability in terms of just like visibility. It's going to be there, but for people of a certain age, it becomes much more difficult to read the content on the sign. From a self-serving standpoint, there's a competitive aspect. We're a privately owned company. We compete against a publicly traded company. All of their every one of their signs on interstates in the metro are 14 by 48, so it makes us non-competitive. And I think that the last thing to think about then is like just in terms of being able to serve clients' needs, that's a standard size advertisement, so nationally advertising is bought when you work with advertising agencies on that 14 by 48 sign. In the grand scheme of things, if you're rolling through that intersection, the average person likely wouldn't know the difference between a 10 by 30 or a 14 by 48, other than readability on like smaller content on an advertisement may be more difficult. So we were hoping that by giving up the 10 foot of height, we could get the standardized sign face. I know there was some discussions of might it go away one day or what have you, and with regard to the current use, that wasn't so much our consideration. Our consideration was, hey, can we have it the standardized size so we can accommodate some of those advertising agencies' needs, because that is the way that the medium is bought on the 14 by 48 dimension. And then hoping that by making concession to be 10 foot shorter, if you look at the visual that was provided, it's not really a whole lot of difference in overall impact there, but for a small company, it makes a huge difference just from being able to serve clients' needs. So, I think the last thing I wanted maybe to have you consider too is just, and I understand if you don't like a billboard, you don't like a billboard, and I'm not going to convince you to change that, but there is an economic factor here too, which is when we have dollars rolling through suburbs and through the metro, we are pulling those dollars off of our controlled access highway to drive tax base. and to drive sales for economic development for other businesses in the city of Oklahoma City. So,
How did everybody else get a 14 by 48 sign?
I think somewhere in the 2008, 2009, there was because the draft was circulated as a 14 by 48. I think in the final hour, they changed the zoning on C3 to cap it as 300. And C3 is the only zoning code that has that conditional use that the lot can't be developed. And so in the final moments, because I remember because I had another permit that was affected by that, and in the final moments, I think before it was voted into law, they changed it from a 1448 down to 10 by 30. I don't know what the motive is. I can tell you from a small business owner perspective, well, if you were Goliath and you had 2,600 billboard displays in the metro and you're the small family-owned company, that just took our ability away to effectively compete or serve other businesses in the community. In this case, we're going to build it irregardless, but it allows us to maybe better serve our clients' needs. I don't really believe if you stood in that intersection, whether it was 10 foot taller or a little bit wider, it really makes any kind of adverse impact aesthetically on the corridor. It's already going to be there. So in our case, it just allows us to be consistent with the industry standard and be able to consistently serve our clients' needs. So.
Are you ready?
I am. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Well, for me, taking into consideration particularly where this is, where Interstate 235 meets Interstate 44 and what is around it, I understand you don't like the spuds specifically for a billboard, but I'm in favor of it, so I'll make a motion to approve the spud as presented. Second.
So just to be clear, to approve the spud, which carves out the few lots, gives them bigger size versus height. We're bringing it down 10 feet, but it's larger.
Right.
Okay. Right. So. And I have a motion, a second, to approve. Item number 26. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
27, 28, 29, 30, and 31 were continued. Item 32 is a set of comprehensive plan amendments to Plan OKC. By law, we're not required to introduce comp plan amendments, but we like to do that to give the public time to look at the documents and come back and think about it and ask questions. So today we're just introducing the comp plan amendment. I'll run over briefly for the public what we talked about in our last Planning Commission study session for these. There also is a handout that we've provided in the packet and to the public where you can go see all of the individual changes in the comprehensive plan. So between now and the time of the date that it is set for the public hearing, which would be December 14th, if there are any questions or potential changes, we can make those. And Philip Walters from the Planning Department and I will run through this very quickly for you. So if somebody could advance my slide. Philip, are you in charge of the slides for me? Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay. Does it work? All right. So when we adopted Plan OKC, we committed to at least every 2 years looking at the comprehensive plan comprehensively, because we know that our built environment is going to change in that time. Also, we understood that when we developed our comprehensive plan, even though we put a lot of energy and time into getting things right, as you work with something, you'll realize that some things, the wording of it is a little bit confusing, and there's an opportunity to clarify certain things. So we've been keeping track of all of the potential changes that we could propose to make our plan easier, clearer to understand, more usable by applicants. And we also wanted to brush off the comprehensive plan's land use typologies maps to reflect what development has been approved to date and how that might affect those comprehensive plan designations. In addition, we have been working on a couple other things with the Planning Commission and City Council. One of them being when an applicant petitions the city to detach or de-annex, or if we annex land in, we have an internal process where we can come develop a committee to evaluate the proposal. The Planning Commission can provide a recommendation to City Council. Staff analysis accompanies that. A lot of times during that process, we've realized that an applicant may not be aware of all the questions and the background information that City Council and Planning Commission will ask. So in order to help everybody kind of bring all the information to the table to avoid a very lengthy process of back and forth, we've outlined some of the thinking about the purpose and intent and the expectations that the petitioner would have when they come to the city for a proposal. And the comprehensive plan is a great place to capture that. So we've recommended some modifications for a new section. And then a couple of modifications in our development guide, which is that section that is pulled out that's mostly used for development review when you all hear applications for rezoning.
All right.
And then we're going to develop a way to track all our comprehensive plan amendments through an appendix. So I'll go through those quickly. Next slide. So the first is the annexation and detachment section. In the very first chapter of the comprehensive plan, we have an introduction, has a section about maintaining Plan OKC. So as you know, if City Council approves a de-annexation or a detachment and an annexation, it affects our municipal boundaries, and then therefore we have to change our comprehensive plan map. So it made sense that when we maintain the comprehensive plan, we put this section here. So like I said, it gives the background information that petitioners should include in their request, so it helps you make an informed recommendation and ultimate decision, and those possible considerations for the decision so that we understand what the city's stance is when considering attachments and detachments, that it's for a tangible benefit to Oklahoma City and its residents. Go back one. Okay. The next section is in the development guide, and we've been working on trying to define and encourage the development of livable streets. What is that coming from? It's not me. I'm not hiccuping in a male voice. Livable streets, you might know those as complete streets. Complete streets is another term from livable streets. And what we've done is in our Chapter 2 development section of the chapter under infrastructure and investment, talked about what guiding principles help us think about developing a system, a transportation system that works for everybody over time as we build it. As we have an opportunity to invest in the redevelopment of our streets, we can think about how those streets function so that we can think about if that street needs to have potential changes made to accommodate things like on-street parking or bike lanes, or if it's a commercial zone, we want to make sure that we can accommodate all of those different users of the street. So we've articulated some principles of livable streets and incorporated them here. We also have in our transportation chapter called Connect OKC a goal that reflects our willingness to look at this and implement it over time. And we've added a new initiative in the Connect OKC element of the plan tied to these plan policies. Also in the development guide, we have our land use typology areas, and you recognize the map, which is the next slide, which is our system for evaluating development proposals based on the type of land use and the preferred development we'd like to see across Oklahoma City. So each one of these different land use typology areas that's shown in this map in color has an accompanying page in the comprehensive plan that explains it. And so this next slide, click, click, there it is. This shows a typical page layout for the rural low-intensity area. So you see under that first section, that's the description that defines the characteristics of that land use typology area. That second little section up in the upper right-hand corner of the page explains typical density ranges and lot sizes that would be appropriate within that type of land use typology. Then the bottom half of the page that describes these land use typology area has development policies, and these are the things that we pull from in our staff report when a development proposal comes to us for review, and development policies can address the design of the site so that you can consider things like site design, building form, location, and connectivity. So that third part guides how the development sits on the site and how it interacts with the adjacent land uses around it. So working with these pages and development proposals, we found some things that we needed to clarify. We've made several text changes in the rural, urban reserve, employment reserve, and heavy industrial definitions. Those are in more detail in the handouts, but the biggest example is that, for example, the heavy industrial layer. The way that the wording was written before talked about uses being appropriate in heavy industrial. We found that this was so limiting because small-scale industrial, office, and commercial development also can be appropriate in heavy industrial areas as long as we can apply those criteria for site design, building scale, those types of things. So we've made some slight modifications to the text to allow your consideration for other uses that are compatible within HI. The next section of changes that we made was to the tables. The density range tables that I talked about. These tables were really different for each land use typology area, so we're using the same criteria to define it for every one of them. So for example, gross density, you'll see in the red box, lot sizes and floor to area ratio will be consistent among all. And it's really the same basic information just stated in a different way so that it's consistent.
I believe they've been out after hours as well.
The third change is to those development policies that I mentioned that fall on the bottom half of the page. So in the open space, rural medium, rural low, and urban medium categories, we've made some slight modifications. These are really a lot of clarifications on how you interpret policy. The example that we've given on this slide is in the rural low and rural medium area where the policy was to cluster retail and other commercial uses at intersections and freeway interchanges along major arterials. Well, we also had a development policy that was written in the back of the plan that gives you a little more definition of what that means and where it's appropriate. We wanted to make sure there was no confusion between the wording of those two, so we're recommending to replace one policy for another just for clarity and consistency's sake. And I mentioned those policies in the back of the plan. We do have an implementation guide in the back of Plan OKC that include all of the recommendations throughout the plan in one chapter. But a lot of the recommendations that were in that one chapter include development-related policies that we cite sometimes under other considerations in your staff report. We felt like since that development guide, that Chapter 2 development guide is a standalone document that we give to developers, they weren't getting these development policies that were in the back with that one development guide. So we pulled those development policies to this chapter, so it's basically a repeat. But it gives people a better idea of all the things they would be evaluated against if they came into the city for a rezoning proposal. Under the land use compatibility section of the plan, we had a few modifications, really more clarifications. We have some charts and some processes and some matrices in there that describe what compatibility means and how we evaluate compatibility. The first thing is a step-by-step process that was in the comprehensive plan. It had a flow chart kind of process before that was a little bit confusing that might have implied if you go through this flow chart, then you automatically get a building permit. It really didn't mean to imply that you get an automatic building permit. It's that you have to go through a series of evaluations and approvals before you can apply. So we just clarified and streamlined that page.
It's subjective, but it would just be up to the installer.
And then the next section under compatibility was charts that talk about residential density ranges. We included some illustrative graphics to explain, thank you, Janice, explain what gross density means. Gross density is that term that we're trying to use throughout all the land use typology areas to say what range of density is appropriate. So we felt like having an illustrative example would help people understand that concept. Hi, Francis. Are you checking on the mics? Okay, next slide, Philip. Likewise, on that same plan section, you'll go to the next page. We've also made some corrections within the land use compatibility table. We believe that we might have had a typo in the table that we're correcting, so you'll see the little red boxes are highlighting that. The section below, that's the big red box, shows that kind of an overall change in the definitions of uses. This became a little bit cumbersome and hard to use because if someone were to come in and say, I have a specific use, which category does it fall in, those uses may or may not have been compatible with the zoning definition of that use. So we've updated these to reflect the same language that falls in our zoning code. That way there's not an overlap between different zoning classifications and our definition of use. Okay? And then I think this is the last change that we made is in the compatibility section. How we use compatibility is that if someone makes a recommendation to develop someplace, you look at the surrounding land uses, and there are certain triggers that make us look at it for, is your use compatible? Some of these things might be building height or setbacks or scale of development. The way that these triggers were written over and over again, we kept seeing there were questions, a little bit of confusion about the wording. So basically, we've refined that. A lot of it had to do with how far a building sets back. If a building is higher than the adjacent use, how far back that building would need to be. So we have made the triggers and the mitigation measures much clearer to understand, so people know what the expectation might be if they can mitigate against incompatible uses. And then we have looked at the land use across Oklahoma City. We've found that what we reviewed in our study session were in two categories. We had recommended some map modifications, but since our study session, we have a case that you'll see on your agenda that's asking for a modification with an employment reserve. So this is actually new information you're going to hear today about one area in Oklahoma City that we would recommend making that modification for when it comes back to you. And so we want to have Philip walk you through those briefly, and if you need time to think about that, we can deal with that. Okay, Philip?
Good. The first one is the heavy industrial overlay, which was designed, layer, to provide a good space for industrial to be able to function without much conflict with the neighbors. And the existing designation is detailed there on the left. As we decided to look back into this, we looked for if new development activity was leading a direction in one way or another, if the general developability was still there for the sites as they've taken shape and formed over time. And then we just generally went through with a more detailed scale. And that led us to a few different changes. They're highlighted in an orange outline here. And in almost every case, what we found was that once we looked at these particular small areas, we were seeing more residential uses than we expected, which presents a compatibility challenge for industrial. We were seeing vacant land that already had I-2 or I-1 zoning, and so the heavy industrial wasn't adding a lot to its ability to develop industrially. Or we were seeing a lot of land that had industrial zoning, but does not by any means feel or function industrially for the actual users going by. North of the airport there, north of Will Rogers, along Meridian and along Reno, there's an awful lot of land that is zoned industrial, but functioning as some version of a hotel or retail. So it wasn't really meeting the test of what HI is trying to do in that area, as well as a couple small ones, one over by Tinker where there's just not any real land left, and that was just kind of an oddity that occurred based on another case. So we're proposing the removal of that one. Another one down by the edge of Moore there, 89th and near Sooner, where again the land is already I-2, but there are a lot of uses around that probably wouldn't be so compatible with heavy industrial, so there's not a lot of cause for leaving the heavy industrial layer there. And then that leads us to proposing these changes of removing that heavy industrial. On the next layer, the urban reserve, we considered the first time, of course, the availability of both water and sewer and the fire service and the general potential to urbanize, especially with respect to the sewer shed. But this was land that, at the first look, at the original creation of Plan OKC, didn't meet all those tests to be urban, but showed some promise. So we've looked back again and to see where there have been physical changes, where utility lines have moved and extended, and also been a little more relaxed on our definition, going out to a quarter mile there, of is this really already served or not. Again, you're looking for orange outlines here. There were a few in the top right corner of the map up there east of 35, around Britton and Wilshire, where these sites now have utilities available. And the same story is true in that little arc you see around on the southwest in the Mustang and Yukon area. There are a number of sites where the utilities are now available to those sites, and if we were to redesignate Plan OKC today, we would probably have called them ULI. So that's why all of those are proposed for change. And then the employment reserve that Aubrey mentioned a moment ago, that was, of course, designated largely based on the LNAP, or Employment Land Needs Assessment Action Plan, and was designed to signal that these were good pieces of land, usually very large, usually with a non-residential zoning, but sometimes with an R1 zoning, that would be good for attracting large-scale employment development. So we reconsidered where there were R1 tracts, and we're down here around County Line and Southwest 29th. And this was the area that Aubrey mentioned. There's a proposal right now to still do a residential use there, and it is currently zoned R1. And as we dug in a little deeper to that LNAP area, that study's comments on the area, it said that it would be a good area probably for warehousing and transportation-related industrial uses, and there's an awful lot of land in this area, as you can see by the map, that's still heavy industrial and would still be appropriate for that. So allowing the R1 to go ahead here would require the removal of that employment reserve layer, and there's not a large convincing need to keep that little piece of ER at this point, given the surroundings. So that this map shows the proposed change of just removing that small area of employment reserve.
And then this is the last section that we'd be adding a tool so that we can track any comprehensive plan amendments. We can also include all the past comprehensive plan amendments that have been made, and it would be a new appendix at the end of the plan. And that's a summary of our changes. So like I said, if the commission wants to set this for public hearing in December, that's what the staff report is recommending, and we can do another presentation at that time and hear any comments from the commission and recommendations from the public at that time.
Motion.
Second.
I'll take it.
I'll take a minute. I'll make a motion.
I have a motion and a second to set down the amendments to the OKC plan for hearing on December the 14th. If you'll cast your votes, please. And that's when we'll hear it. Planning Commission committees, members, additional items, I guess is where we are.
Did you say members?
Go ahead.
I was curious. I have had personally a challenge making it to the study sessions that occur before the meetings. It carves a large portion for me personally out of the day when we have those, and it's not a criticism of staff, Sarah. No, because I know that we need those. It's not that. I was just wondering, though, if it, to throw this out for at least consideration by the members and staff, obviously, if it's, we could block those and like do 3 hours once every quarter. I don't know. I don't know what the schedule ought to be, but it's, for me personally, for planning today, it's a little easier to add, get a block of 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Maybe not on Thursday, but at some other time. I'm not saying that is not necessarily tied to a meeting, because that usually ends up being pretty much a pretty good portion of the day if we started at 11 for a meeting downtown, et cetera. So that's just something I wanted to ask, see if anybody else had any thoughts on that, or think about it. We can talk about it later.
Commissioner Powers and I also discussed whether or not it would be a good idea to reissue a survey of the commissioners based on your schedules and times that you prefer to meet. We had done that previously, but we have so many new commissioners now, we thought we should maybe try that again. So we can devise that same type of SurveyMonkey survey and looking at specific dates moving forward and try to just get something scheduled. The other option is when we adopt our new calendar for the year, that could also be set as long in advance as possible, so you can really plan around any study sessions and meetings you need.
I'm not sure what the logistics are there. I genuinely don't know, but I would echo Mike's comments that I think it would be helpful to try to, I would much rather just power through a few of them at once instead of trying to make every other Thursday include a study session where I'm turning out of the office at 10:30 and here at 4 o'clock. That's really difficult. Yeah.
Well, so one exception to that, though, and I can't make it today, but if it's going to be a short one and there is a necessity, I think doing it right before this meeting does work if it's a short one, because then you're coming all the way down there anyway. That's true. So the one that today at 11:45, that's a lot different than 10:30.
You might
coming down a little earlier.
You might want to, all of you, try one of the power through ones before you make up your mind about that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's try that and see how it goes, and before we, make a firm decision about one or the other. I mean, I've done both, and, you might want to have an actual basis of comparison rather than make that decision theoretically.
Well, but if you have a study session before every meeting, I mean, that's essentially, you're powering through already.
And, I don't think we've ever proposed that we were going to do it every meeting, but we had come probably, up with enough things that we need to talk about that we were probably looking at maybe every other meeting. So, the problem, as you may well imagine, with getting this many people together in one place for any period of time, I mean, it just is going to be what it is. We're going to have to figure out how to do it, so.
And of course, today we ran out of time in our meeting, so.
So you're going to get to revisit that. We'll swing back around to what we were talking about today. So, but yeah, I think we'll do that. Okay. What else? Is there anybody here who actually wants to be heard? Yes. Well, that's entirely up to you.
Well, so I'm Dawn Watts. I'm here on behalf of the American Heart Association, and we're just in support of the update to the comprehensive plan with the livable streets language.
Oh.
So I had sent you all an email of a resolution that the school board passed in support, and I also have a letter from the City County Health Department in support. So I'm actually here to say thank you and good job, and we'll be back on the 14th.
Well, yes, thank you. Although most of that goes to staff, so. They're the ones that do all the work. What else? Planning department. Any other members? Did any other members have anything else they wanted to talk about? No? Planning department? No? Development services?
I might have one thing, actually.
Huh? I'm sorry?
I do have one thing. One quick thing. I have a member of my ward, a resident of my ward, who has asked me about the progress of the traditional neighborhood overlay and has asked to meet, and I have no idea about it, so any information that could be provided would be excellent.
That's not true that you have no idea about it.
I don't have much. I have not seen any material about it. I've heard about it. I've been a part of maybe one discussion about it, but I really don't have any material on it. So.
Well, we're working on that. Janice and I are going to get together and discuss next steps on a potential meeting to invite people to come learn about it. We also will have the opportunity to discuss it. It was going to be presented at the last study session, but we split apart the ABC from the TNO so that, and obviously we needed the time to talk about the ABC. But we're going to discuss this next week. We're going to have probably one or more meetings that are informal outside of the Planning Commission study session process, and then bring it back to the Planning Commission to present the full package and proposal. So stay tuned. We'll make sure and keep everybody informed about that. Have anything to add, Janice?
No, that was a good summary.